Hello everyone! It is today my privilege to speak to an incredible woman who started working at Google back when few even heard of it, way before it turned into the world-changing giant that it is today. She's an award-winning leader, speaker who spent 20 years in the industry. She's the director of Google Search. Joining me today from Canada, my co-founder, Arohi Gopal, will be introducing more about Alana Karen.
Hello everyone, it's so nice to see you today. My name is Arohi Gopal and I am the co-founder of Globe Uplift. It is an absolute pleasure to have Ms Alana here with us today. Ms Alana has authored the critically acclaimed book titled The Adventures of Women in Tech: How We Got Here and Why We Stay, which was published last year. It encompasses insights on women in tech, who they are, what paths they pursued, what skills were most critical to their success, and so much more about their journeys. She goes in depth on topics vital to their success, from being a great leader to navigating through obstacles in life.
Let's have her join us. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, are we audible?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ms. Alana, for being here. Firstly, I must say I started listening to your book yesterday on Audible. It was absolutely amazing. It's wonderful to see how you've interviewed so many great women you've worked with, and more importantly, provided practical and feasible information for us young students to go into future tech industries and careers. But before anything, we want to hear more about you and your work at Google. All of us are here to gain a lot of insights from you. We're super excited to hear from a woman in STEM with a position of power in one of the biggest world-changing companies. So over to you.
Sure, absolutely. And I heard you introduce me and I felt like I should caveat a bit, even though women often caveat and we should watch out for that. But really my position is within specifically the infrastructure group within search. So while I am a director of search, I don't own all the things. And I can't actually tell you everything about how search works either. It's just so big and there's so much to it. But I am within search infrastructure, and what I own, which is in common with a lot of the jobs that I've had in Google, is more of an operations role. So I run program management for infrastructure, and those are the people who help the engineers get things done and achieve what they want to, and all of that good stuff, whether it's milestone setting or goal setting or tracking down bugs and why they're not resolved. All of that, how it actually gets done work. And that's in common with a lot of my jobs. They've often been operations oriented or leadership oriented, right? Managing a big group of people, leading a big group of people. You're kind of probably hearing my family in the background. It's evening where I am, so you're getting sort of the full treatment.
Thank you so much for giving up your time as well. We really appreciate it. And thanks for letting us know what your job entails. Now, I think we can get started with the questions.
Great.
Arohi?
Yes, Ms. Alana, we're curious to know more about how your path unfolded, because although you have spent 2 decades at Google in various operational and leadership roles, you started off as a history major. So it is certainly impossible to compress your journey in a stanza, but do you mind flipping through the pages to the chapter that led to the non-linear path of your career?
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to ask, like, how the heck did I end up in a tech role? I really was more of your liberal arts type person in college. I was taking history classes, creative writing, French. That was my whole thing. And it wasn't that I didn't like math or science. It just wasn't necessarily where I excelled. It wasn't where my passions were, etc. And this was back when really, tech is how we think about it today wasn't really a thing. No one had really talked to me about engineering because I wasn't really going down the science path, and it would have been, at least at that point, heavy in chemical engineering or other types of engineering. And it was on my own that I discovered over time, because I was using computers a lot, that you could make websites. And I got interested in self-teaching myself HTML and how to tweak JavaScript and what did some of this simple coding lead to. And that is what led me down the tech road, because I sort of self-made myself. This was back before there were classes. There were no online classes. Maybe there were some books. I think there was Coding for Dummies, right? Like there was a little bit of that out there that you could do, but not nearly as much as today. And so I sort of self-taught myself, eventually discovering that even though I did like tech, that the jobs I liked doing day to day involved people a lot more. So at a certain point, around when I would have had decided, was I going to get more serious about coding or was I going to go down other routes? I ended up going down the route of more business-facing roles within tech, customer service, operations, etc., because that's what appealed to me more. And I, luckily enough, that was just when tech, as we think about it today, whether it's, the big technology companies or startups, later apps, other kinds of things, that's when it really started to take off and there were more of those roles.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of the charm of it. You learned it by yourself, and you were also able to take a role that wasn't what we say traditionally is kind of technology. We kind of imagine sitting in front of a computer and coding all day. But like you said, you focus more on the business side, and that is a very great way to put it as well. So yes, on to you, Ishita.
Yes, it was wonderful to hear about your journey and great to see how you were self-taught and sort of paved your own path. So moving on, in one of your podcasts, we heard a podcast interview. You mentioned that you're more hungry for experience than a job title. And we absolutely love this approach. So can you share with us something that you learned at Google that you wouldn't have elsewhere?
You really did your research, by the way. I think it would have been really hard for me to replicate the experience of what it's like to join a company when it's 300 people and have it grow to the size that it is today, and to have it go from essentially 2 products to the number of products that we have today, and just the various things that you learn along the way when you are on that journey with a company, the various stages a company can have, various stages teams can have, from when they're in startup mode to when they're getting more established, to when things are totally figured out and what does that feel like, to when things get completely thrown up because of a reorganization or whatnot. So I feel like I just had this broad, I never ended up going back to business school. I never got, I just have that BA in history. Because I think I just felt like Google ended up being such a school on its own of all those different experiences and all the different ways a business would have to mature. And I would say that's even true now, where we're big and we're still figuring out, how do you adult and innovate and do all of these things at the same time when you're this big and this global. It's still, to me, every stage has been really interesting to me. And I think I would have had a hard time replicating that, certainly at one company, but maybe even overall, going to different companies and trying to get that experience of everything from hyper growth to growing up with tech in a company that was growing up.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. And yes, as you mentioned, even before Google was a thing, you were in Google and you sort of grew with the company. And that's, I think, really wonderful to see. And it's wonderful how you must have seen the transformation in yourself and witness how Google was also transforming at the same time. So it's nice being in sync with it. So yes, Arohi, over to you.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, Ms Alana, it was great to hear about your experience, and like Ishita said, see kind of how you transformed as Google transformed itself too. My second question is the classification of pink versus blue roles, responsibilities, and stereotypes has long been an issue in society. How do you go about tackling this unconscious bias in the technology industry? What were some of your observations back then, and how are they different to your observations now?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I do feel like I'm on a journey still seeing all the places that this plays a role. And I talk a little bit about it in my book. Having grown up with a mother who was, the uber feminist, and feeling like now women, at least in the US, were going to college and graduating with higher rates of degrees, both bachelor degrees and more advanced degrees at higher rates than men, seeing a lot of women in different roles, etc. I think I sort of got lulled into thinking we were doing good. We were doing okay. And then what you hear in the book is me sort of realizing over time, oh, wait a second, like, you don't we've been trained by society for centuries to be in certain roles. And the women traditionally are the caretakers of most societies. Traditionally, if you're listening and you have a dad who does all the things, yay. But if you look at sort of traditionally what happens, the women have been trained from young, from a young time period to help others, take care of others, that the we is more important. And they often end up in those roles, whether it's nurse or teacher or whatnot. And now, yes, we can do other roles, but it's not like that unconscious thing of us expecting women to play that role, to care more about the we than the I, to, maybe do the things that we just assume they'll do, plan the events, get the coffee, whatever it is. Like, that doesn't go away overnight, even if we're really woke. And so, to get to back to your question, I think it's been interesting to observe over time, where does that play a role? And initially have it be so, like, I didn't even see it, to then me start to see it, to then figuring out, oh, okay, well, what would I do about it? Like, I'm a leader, what would I do about it? And so now as a leader, I can say, like, hey, it's weird we keep asking these same people to take notes in meetings. Or it's weird that they're the ones expected to volunteer all the time. And now I see it, but you sort of have to train yourself to see it and to essentially kind of rewrite that code, because we've got that code in all of us that we would just sort of accept men not doing things, expect women to do things, not like women if they do certain things, think it's totally normal if a man does it, right? Certain tone is okay with women, certain tone is not okay with women, right? Like, we've got all of these things that pop up, and I've seen it all over the place, honestly. I would have too long an answer, but it is really interesting to start training yourself to see it, and then training yourself to question it, and then training yourself to speak up and see what you could do about it.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to put it. And yes, it's like training yourself to see it and rewriting that code that we all have for ourselves. We have, I guess, certain expectations that are really made by how society thinks and what society kind of tells us about. So yes, it's rewriting the code for ourselves. And once we rewrite it for ourselves, then we can go ahead and rewrite it for others. So yes, well said, very much well said. Ishita, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And the next question was posed actually by one of my teachers when I informed them that I will be joining Ms Alana for a conversation. So it was very intriguing, and I'm curious to know your views on it. In a podcast between Sam Harris and Rob Reid on engineering the apocalypse, they propose a suggestion that analyzing web searches could protect humankind from the next pandemic. For example, identifying early cases through, analysis of like symptoms like eye pain for COVID example. So we just wanted to know, because it's so like it pertains a lot to your job title, especially, and as you involve a lot of project management, I'm sure you might be aware of how things flow and like. So we were just curious whether this is feasible for like mass application further ahead in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I should say I'm not an official spokesperson for Google, nor do I know all the things Google. So this is just my answer off the top of my head. We certainly, I mean, I do think that's some of the benefits of the broad level of searches that we have coming through us every day, that you can see those trends, and they could be fun things like who's the most searched athlete for the upcoming Olympics, and they could be more serious things like where in the world are these symptoms starting to emerge. And we do have a tool, I believe it's still called Trends. I don't think that they've changed that, where you can see some of that data just publicly play out. And definitely, I have been very pleased to see us partner more with health agency advocates, et cetera, during this pandemic to figure out what we could do to both push information out and make sure information is accessible and useful per our mission, per the Google mission, but also what potentially might we be able to identify through that kind of data. So it's definitely doable. I mean, I think you always have to watch out for how, this is the big questions coming up in ML and ethics and all of this stuff right now, is how you use it. What do you do with it? And are you, again, sort of only searching for certain things or only asking certain questions and reinforcing certain biases, or, adding subjectivity to this stuff that then causes further issues. And it's a big hot topic in ethics with ML, machine learning, and AI right now. And I think we'll continue to see that really play a big role. So doable, but with, caution.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. And yeah, I agree. There's a lot of ethical things to keep in mind as well, and especially these days where there's data protection really tightening and a lot of other ethical conundrums linked to AI, ML you mentioned. So there's a lot of factors playing into it, but yeah, well said, but thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And yes, like Ishita said, and like Ms Alana also said, these things are really important right now, especially like you said, we are rewriting the code right now. So maybe before, these things like ethics and kind of justice and all of these things weren't that important or weren't that like bolded in technology, but now they're definitely seen as more important, and they should continue to be seen as more important in the future.
Excuse me.
Yes, and so yes, another question I have is that your experience is invaluable to so many of us, from like leaders in tech to students like Ishita and I who are planning to pursue a career in tech. So what advice do you have for students like us who are going to embark on this journey of tech?
Well, shameless plug, you can always read the book. You can always read the book. I interview over 80 women, different career paths, different backgrounds, different ways they think about their careers, different experiences they had, and different ways that they navigated issues in their life, and different tools that they built, all of that kind of stuff. So if you can find these things other places too, especially if you're part of societies or whatnot, but it's there, it's always a resource. And I think that really does speak to my major advice, is that it's a little different, but it's kind of the same problem that I had when I was starting out. It's different in that now you could take hundreds of classes. You could read hundreds of journals. You could read different books. You can do these things. And so there is more noise to having you try to figure out where you would go. When I was interviewing, it was sort of like, Yahoo or a startup, right? Like there just weren't that many options. There weren't that, it was like Yahoo, Microsoft, startup, kind of like there weren't that many options. And so now you have a lot more, like, and how you figure out, like, do I like hardware? Do I like software? Am I a startup person? Do I like big companies? Like, do I like program management? Do I like product management? Do I like being an engineer? Do I want to manage people? Right? So there is a lot that you have to explore at this point, not all at once. I wouldn't try to explore it all at once, but following your interests and maybe even people that you see on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatnot, who really piques your interest. How do you start to follow them? Maybe even reach out to people on LinkedIn and say like, hey, I have these 3 questions about your job. Do you have 30 minutes? I'd love to chat online, right? And just, you could do that now. I couldn't do that. You could do that now all over the world. And that's an amazing tool. And you can be really deliberate about building up and saying, okay, this is what I'd like my first job to be. And then I'll see whether I like that. You know, I can always figure out something in the future if that's not what I want to do, or I could try something on the side if I want to see if I'd like something else. But just start to like practically do that. And along the way, look for that support, whether it's books, whether it's Facebook groups, whether it's this Instagram, you know, whatever it is, look for those support channels where you can build a group for yourself, and whether it's a couple people or larger, that you can sort of check in with along the way and say like, hey, I'm thinking about this career change. What do you think? What advice would you give? Or even you just had a bad meeting and you're not sure, was I just mansplained or am I just being sensitive? These are the things that will help you as you go through your career. Just kind of like a healthy appetite for exploration, but with support. And I see sometimes people do one or the other. And I'm not going to say that's the wrong thing to do, but for instance, if you're a healthy appetite for exploration and you're doing it alone, I just see a lot of people have more self-doubt and more questions, and they could, you know, with minimal effort, even if you're an introvert, I am too, find a couple people who are kind of the people you check in with and ask for advice or just gut check with. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that was a great way to put it, that having a healthy appetite for exploration, but also seeking that support that you need just to make sure that you're on the right path, and you know, that the things you're doing, just to make sure that you clear that doubt in your head, like you said. Yes, and Ishita, definitely.
Sorry, I'm messing with the filters. I felt like maybe something would make me. Does this one just make me look like an animal, maybe? Yes. Ooh.
That is amazing.
Okay. This is why you shouldn't give 40-year-olds Instagram. We're gonna, yeah. This is too much fun. Okay, I gotta go back. I'll go back to normal. I'll go back.
And based on what you were just mentioning, I really thought of a great thing to put it forward was, we need to like realize the leverage we have in the 21st century compared to people like you. What did you have at that point? We have so many resources, so many places we can go. We have so many communities to build on, so many platforms, be it LinkedIn, Instagram, literally anywhere we can find a lot of people with invaluable experiences like yours. And I think that's a great point, because when you started out, everything was not pre-established. You were the person involved along with the startups, which we now see as tech giants and everything. So that's a great way to look at it for us youth, especially because at times we tend to overlook the opportunities and all the things we have in place, and we sort of take them for granted. But I really appreciate what you said, and yeah, thank you so much for enlightening us. Another question we had was, you're an amazing woman in STEM. What makes you so confident, so powerful, and so determined?
I have had some time to develop it, by the way. I will, looking back, I do feel like, for example, I really came in like many women do, and just assume that what made me successful in school will make me successful at work. And it's not completely wrong. But what made you successful at school was often sort of heads down, doing the work, getting it done. And often you were rewarded for actually being the quiet one, right? Like not being the one to distract the classroom or speak up or offer an opinion or debate with the teacher or whatever it was, right? Like it was just, you know, get it done, turn it in, be consistent, be reliable, be dedicated. And again, you know, maybe you would be part of clubs or whatever, and you would take care of the we and the caretaking, right? So that was basically it. So you start work, and that's what you start to do, and it works. It works for a period of time. And I think that's a little misleading because eventually you can kind of hit this, it feels like that momentum is slowing because at some point you have to show leadership qualities. And it turns out they didn't really train us for that. You know, that is speaking up in the room. That is debating. That is being willing to put out the unpopular idea that maybe doesn't feel as supportive for the we, but is the right thing to suggest. And tech often has this bias that like, that's what we picture. We picture this, you know, like Steve Jobs being the anachronistic leader and, you know, like asking the questions no one will ask and not being satisfied. And it's just really funny because then you come in and you're like the quiet, you know, hard worker. And at some point, at first that usually works. And then at some point it kind of stops. And so I think that really over time, I had to figure out how can I have my cake and eat it too? Like, how can I be myself? Because I'm never going to be like a Steve Jobs. And but amp it up a little bit. Like, be willing to speak up, be willing to lead, and acknowledge that I have good ideas. Like, I have the idea. I am thinking the right things. I am saying the right things. I am making the right decisions. And those are things I should share with each other, with other people. And I should ask for the roles that I want, or I should ask for the help that I need, that I deserve that. And I think sometimes you just sort of have to like build it up bit by bit. It's not like all of a sudden one morning you wake up and you're like, I'm going to do it. And you go into work and you know how to speak up in that meeting. No, it's like you try it. You try it in one meeting where it feels safest. And then because that worked, you expand a little bit. And if it doesn't work somewhere, you kind of figure out, okay, well, maybe if I prep the person before I bring it up there, or maybe if I get allies before I'm in the meeting, so it's not just me bringing up the idea. And you do kind of have to test it, not just because of your environment and the different people and the different meetings and the culture, but also just you, like what's your style? Like, you might see another woman leader or another male leader and think like, that's it. I love what they do. But then when you try to do it, it doesn't feel like you, it lands flat. I use humor a lot. Not everyone should. Not because you're not funny. I just mean it's not your style, right? Like, maybe you're not funny, but I just mean it's not your style. And so, for example, if you're actually really angry about something and you try to make a joke about it, really doesn't work. So yeah, you have to feel that stuff out. And I think it's through that, you know, like, it's not that I was born this way. I wasn't. And if any of my colleagues were on here from 20 years ago, they would say, no, she wore overalls and she hid in the cubicle. So it's really figuring out bit by bit, what is your style? And that will make you feel confident and trying some things. And I will say that if you end up in an environment where you've done that, you've tried some things and it's not working and you don't feel confident, well, guess what? It's probably them. It's not you. It's a great time to ask your support network just to make sure. But at a certain point, you can sort of say, I gave it some time. I tried some things and I feel good about it integrity-wise, and it didn't work. So, you know, by the way, you don't have to run away from it, but you can then decide what to do really logically. And I do think sometimes, again, because we've been trained to take care of the we might always deprioritize how we feel, always staying for other people, or always staying because we feel like we should for the company or for our team. And we just have to really watch out for that. Again, kind of a bad side effect of the coding.
Yeah, wow, that's a great way to put it. And as well, I really like how you've sort of shown us how tech is also different, because sometimes, as a point of view of the public, it's either black or white. You're either like really techie or you're this. But I really like how you are one of the people who have truly like revolutionized our thinking, redefined what actually tech is, not just coding, not just like hardcore hardware, software, and all those things, but also managing people, managing clients, bringing more projects, managing them. And I think that's really eye-opening, because at times people just tend to, as well, especially women and girls of our age, they tend to sort of overlook the opportunity for tech and their future in that, because of too many things that are like stereotypical about tech, which is like just the true form of it. But thank you for showing us that there's a different way as well. And your thoughts, I must say, truly resonate a lot. And your book is a testimonial for everything that you're saying at the moment, because I saw that you have one chapter dedicated to, being yourself, finding you, discovering yourself, and your passion and the way you're articulating everything is just truly contagious. And we really look forward to learning more from you in the coming years.
Awesome. Yeah, and what you were saying before, I just will add on, like, I do think we sometimes underrate the people in tech, right? Like, and that there's going to be people problems, and that those skills of dealing with people are just as important, if not more important, than the tech skills that we learn. And so if you're sitting there thinking, oh, I'm not techy enough, don't worry about it. I mean, definitely don't apply for like the techiest of the roles, right? Don't be an ML researcher maybe. But on the other hand, there are all of these roles. Program management is a great example, that are very people facing, and they're about how people work and how you motivate people. And so there is definitely a place for you. If you are motivated and passionate about things that are happening in tech, or even you just think it sounds like great careers, explore, look around LinkedIn, see the different things people do. I spend most of my day with people, not machines, and have for 20 years. So.
Wow, it's wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where we kind of see how important that support is, because just listening to your experiences now, it gives us so much wisdom for the future when we look at it. And if we do come at a spot where we can kind of find our true self, like you said, I think your experience matters a lot to us. So thank you so much for sharing it and for writing such an absolutely brilliant book.
Yeah, and we're so able to speak to you at such a young age, because you work with like people in Google, amazing opportunities for those people and everything. But us students, it's great advice for us, especially now that we transition into university in like a month or so. And we're just really grateful for all the invaluable information. And of course, we would love to finish reading your book as well. Super inspirational. And yes, thank you so much for being very generous with your time. We truly appreciate it.
I'd love feedback and reviews, what you think I did well, what you think I missed when you're done with the book. I'm so glad you're listening to it. That's a lot of listening to me. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.